I had just settled into my new home when 3 men with badges knocked on my door. They claimed they were police officers sent by the HOA to arrest me for breaking community rules. Their cheap uniforms and plastic badges gave them away instantly. They ordered me to step outside, hands behind my back. What they didn't know was that I wasn't just a normal homeowner. I was chief of police for the entire county. I played along, watching their hands shake as they tried to force me into a rusty SUV with no plates. My neighbors peeked from their windows, shocked. One fake officer whispered, "This is bad. He doesn't look scared." I smiled, because I wasn't. They thought I was trapped, but I was about to flip their plan upside down and uncover the ugly secret behind the HOA that sent them. This fight was just beginning. Asterisk, I moved into Green Valley Estates because I wanted peace. After serving more than 20 years on the police force, I had finally earned a quieter life. Being chief of police wasn't just a title, it was a lifetime of long nights, broken families, and dangerous streets. I dreamed of slower mornings, birds in the yard, and friendly neighbors waving as I walked my dog. Green Valley looked perfect: clean sidewalks, trimmed bushes, children laughing near sprinklers. I thought I could finally breathe. On my second evening at the new house, I drove my police-issued truck into the driveway after unpacking, too tired to move it into the garage. A sharp voice called out from behind me, "You can't park that here." I turned and saw a woman in her mid-50s, wearing thick glasses and holding a clipboard like it was a weapon. She introduced herself instantly. "I'm Linda, HOA president." Her tone told me she liked being in charge more than anything. I tried to be polite. "Evening, I'll move it soon. I'm still settling in." She narrowed her eyes. "Vehicles of that nature must be stored out of sight." I almost laughed. Of that nature. It wasn't a monster truck, it was a police vehicle. I told her I understood and continued inside. I thought she'd go away. But the next morning, a bright yellow paper was taped to my door. A violation notice. Parking against community aesthetic and lawn non-compliance? I stepped outside, staring at my perfectly ordinary grass. It wasn't golf course perfect, but it was fine. I'd only lived there 2 days. I took the notice to her office, which was a converted garage stuffed with boxers. She sat behind a flimsy desk like it was a judge's bench. I explained calmly I was new and still unpacking. She talked like she had rehearsed every sentence. "Homeowners are expected to uphold excellence. We maintain a standard," she said, standard, like it was holy. I assured her I wasn't trying to break rules. I even told her I worked in law enforcement, hoping she'd relax. That only made her snort. "Who you work for doesn't matter here. The HOA is the law." That line stuck in my head longer than it should have. I left, brushing it off. A small misunderstanding. She'd calm down eventually. I spent the next days getting settled, meeting neighbors, and helping one elderly man carry groceries. People were friendly, but when I mentioned the HOA, they got quiet. Some laughed nervously, others whispered warnings. "Be careful with Linda," an older lady told me. "She thinks she owns this place." I thought they were exaggerating. That weekend, I mowed my lawn, moved the truck into the garage, and made sure everything looked neat. I assumed the silly drama was over. But Monday morning, another notice was taped to the door, this time a fine. I shook my head, grabbed my coffee, and drove to the police station. I had bigger problems to deal with than a power-hungry HOA president. During the day, I almost forgot about it. Real crimes take priority. But something about Linda bothered me. Something didn't feel normal. I'd seen people misusing authority before, but she seemed desperate for control, like she needed to prove something. That evening, I came home to a crowd gathered near my driveway. People whispered and stared. In the center, Linda held a camera, pointing it at my truck, which was still inside the garage. She watched as if she was waiting for it to misbehave. I stepped out of the car. "Is there a problem?" She smiled, but it wasn't friendly. "Just documenting violations." "There are no violations. The truck is in the garage." She shrugged. "You'll see." I stood there, trying to understand what she hoped to gain. Most HOAs want clean yards, quiet streets, not to terrorize homeowners. Something darker was going on. I could feel it. That night, I reviewed my doorbell camera footage while eating dinner. I watched Linda walk onto my property 3 times in one day. Once she even tried to open my mailbox. That was illegal. A federal offense? This wasn't just bad attitude, it was criminal behavior dressed as authority. I sat back, staring at the screen. Part of me wanted to handle it quietly, but the other part, the part shaped by years of protecting people, told me something was wrong, not just with her, but with this whole neighborhood. I didn't move to Green Valley to hunt criminals, but it seemed trouble had moved in with me. I just didn't know yet how far Linda was willing to go, nor that she was already planning to remove me, by force. 2 days passed without any new notices on my door. I thought maybe Linda had finally backed off. I spent the morning cleaning the backyard, enjoying the quiet. The wind carried the smell of fresh grass. And for a moment, Green Valley felt like the peaceful home I hoped it would be. But quiet places have a way of hiding noise underneath, waiting for the right moment to explode. That afternoon, I decided to take a walk through the neighborhood. I wanted to get to know the area and meet more neighbors. As I walked, I noticed things I didn't see before. Tiny cameras strapped to streetlights, signs with long rules in small print, and letters taped to doors. At one house, an elderly woman quietly removed a notice with trembling fingers. When she saw me watching, she smiled weakly and hurried inside. Something was wrong here. People didn't live, they obeyed. At the corner, I saw a little boy playing with chalk on the sidewalk. A simple drawing of a sun, clouds, and a house. It made me smile, but before I could say hello, a man ran out of a house and grabbed the boy's arm. "No chalk outside the line," he snapped. The boy looked down, confused. The chalk had crossed an imaginary boundary. The father apologized quickly when he noticed me watching, then rushed the child inside. This wasn't normal. Rules meant to keep peace were being used like chains. On my way home, I saw a man sitting in his front yard, clipping hedges with old scissors. I introduced myself. His name was Ray. He was retired and had lived there for 10 years. When I mentioned the HOA, his eyes dropped. "You're new," he said softly. "You don't know them yet. They take money from people. They scare them. If you resist, they fine you. If you still resist..." He stopped talking. His hands shook. "What happens then?" I asked. He looked around before whispering. "They send people to your house." I pressed. He didn't answer. He just pointed at his hedge, pretending to work again. That night, I couldn't sleep. Something about his fear stayed with me. I replayed the message on the notice Linda sent. The HOA is the law. No HOA president should talk like that. This was more than rules about lawn height or garbage cans. I knew the signs of organized intimidation. I'd seen it before in gangs and crooked neighborhoods. The same heavy silence, the same quiet dread. Green Valley felt safe on the surface, but underneath it was rotting. The next morning I headed out to work early. As I stepped outside, a white envelope lay on my porch. No name, no return address. Inside was a single message typed on plain paper. "Leave before you get hurt." No signature, no explanation, just a warning. I read it twice, then looked down the street. Sprinklers ticked, birds chirped. Everything looked normal. But somewhere, eyes were watching me. I slipped the note into my pocket and headed to the station. At work, I ran a quiet search on Linda. If she wanted to play games, I needed to know who she really was. Her record was surprisingly clean. No criminal history, no complaints, nothing. That was unusual. People always leave footprints. Either she was spotless, or someone had cleaned up after her. I didn't like either answer. I also checked property records for Green Valley Estates. The HOA had collected a shocking amount of money over the last few years: fees, special contributions, fines, but hardly any of that money went into repairs or community improvements. It disappeared. The board members had fancy cars, vacation homes, expensive clothes, yet claimed the neighborhood couldn't afford new playgrounds. My instincts buzzed. This was a scam hidden behind flowers and smiling welcome signs. After work, when I returned home, everything felt slightly off. My gate was open. I always locked it. I looked around slowly, checking footprints in the dirt. Someone had been inside my yard. I walked to the front door and ran my hand across the handle. It was warm, recently touched. Inside, nothing was broken, nothing was taken, but I could feel that someone had been inside. My house was clean, too clean, like someone had walked through carefully, touching nothing but watching everything. I checked my bedroom. My closet door was open 2 inches. I never leave it open. Someone had stood right there. I checked the cameras. Every recording from noon to 3 p.m. was missing. Deleted. That wasn't the work of kids or casual intruders. Someone knew exactly what they were doing. I locked every door and sat at the kitchen table in silence. My peaceful home had become a battlefield. I thought Green Valley would be my quiet ending after a long career. But fate had other plans. Whatever Linda and her HOA were doing, they weren't just bullies with a clipboard. They were getting bolder, watching, waiting, and I could feel the storm coming. The next day arrived loud, angry, and dressed in fake uniforms. The next morning began like any other quiet.com, and a little too still. The air outside was cool, but something about the silence felt heavy. I poured myself a cup of coffee and stood by the window, watching the sun rise over Green Valley. The houses looked peaceful, the lawns trimmed, the mailboxes lined up like soldiers. But I'd learned by now that peace here was only an illusion. I was halfway through my coffee when a hard knock echoed through the house. It wasn't a friendly knock. It was loud, sharp, and impatient. I opened the door and froze. 3 men stood outside wearing dark uniforms. They had badges clipped to their shirts and belts with holsters, but the moment I looked closer, I knew something wasn't right. Their uniforms didn't match. The badges were dull and plastic. The patches on their shoulders had crooked stitching, and one of them even said Security Police, a title that doesn't exist anywhere in this state. Chief Marcus Cole, the one in front, asked. His voice tried to sound official, but the tremor in it betrayed him. "That's me," I said evenly. "You're under arrest," he replied, reading from a paper in his hand. "Violation of HOA property rules, public disturbance, and non-payment of fines." I nearly laughed. "Arrest for HOA violations." He nodded stiffly. "You'll need to come with us." "Which department are you from?" I asked, watching their body language. None of them stood like trained officers. Their belts were on wrong, and their fingers fidgeted near their holsters like they didn't even know how to handle the weight. Community Enforcement Division, he answered. That was all I needed to hear. There was no such department. I decided to play along. I stepped outside slowly, pretending to cooperate. My porch camera blinked, red recording everything. The leader took a step closer, trying to grab my arm. His grip was weak and unsure. I let him think he had control, but my mind was racing. These men weren't cops, they were hired by someone. And I didn't need a badge to guess who. Linda, as they started to lead me toward a beat-up SUV parked at the curb. I noticed it didn't have license plates. The windows were tinted too dark. It was the kind of vehicle used when someone wanted to move a person without being noticed. I stopped walking. Where's your warrant? I asked. The man holding my arm stiffened. It's at the station. Oh, I said, smiling. Which one? I run all of them in this county. That's when it clicked for him. His eyes widened. You're the chief of police. I finished for him, pulling my badge from my pocket. The sunlight flashed off the metal, and for a second, none of them moved. Then one of them panicked and ran. The other two froze. I took a slow step forward. Impersonating a police officer is a felony. You want to add kidnapping to that list? The taller one dropped his fake badge immediately and raised his hands. It wasn't my idea, he stammered. She made us do it. I asked, even though I already knew. The HOA lady, he whispered. Linda, she said you were dangerous. She said we just needed to scare you off. I pulled out my radio and called it in. Within minutes, real patrol cars rolled down the street, lights flashing. Neighbors peeked out from behind curtains, their faces pale. The fake officers were handcuffed on my driveway while I stood there, trying to process what just happened. Linda showed up soon after, pretending to be shocked. She shouted, "What is going on here? Why are there police cars?" I turned toward her. "You tell me? These are your men." She laughed, but her voice cracked. "That's ridiculous. I don't know these people." One of the fake officers shouted from the patrol car. "You paid us, Linda. You told us to arrest him." Her smile fell instantly. She turned pale as a ghost. The crowd grew. Neighbors started recording on their phones. I stepped closer and said quietly, "You've been intimidating this whole neighborhood for years. That stops today." Linda tried to speak, but the words got lost in her throat. Real officers approached her, reading her rights. She screamed that it was all a misunderstanding, but no one listened. As they put her in the car, I looked around at the faces watching. For the first time, I saw relief instead of fear. The air felt lighter, but deep down, I knew this wasn't over. The men in custody mentioned others. A bigger plan. A larger network. Green Valley's secrets ran deeper than I thought, and I was just getting started. After the fake officers and Linda were taken away, the neighborhood felt strangely quiet, like everyone was holding their breath. People nodded at me politely, but no one said much. They were grateful, I could tell, but also scared. They'd lived under fear so long that freedom felt suspicious. That evening, I sat on my porch with files from the station. I wanted to know how far this mess went. The 3 fake officers had been interviewed separately, and their stories lined up too well to be lies. Someone, maybe Linda, maybe someone above her had trained them. They weren't just random guys playing dress-up. They were following orders. And those orders weren't small. They spoke about collections, targets, and removals. All words that meant one thing: organized crime. For years, people in Green Valley had been threatened into paying illegal fees. If they resisted, those fake officers showed up. Some families left in the middle of the night, abandoning their homes. Their properties were then sold to preferred buyers, often at suspiciously low prices. The HOA board made money, quietly and constantly. The deeper I looked, the clearer it became. Linda was only a small piece. Someone else had set all this up. Someone smarter. The next morning, I walked the neighborhood again. This time, people came out of their homes. Ray, the man with the trembling hands, walked toward me. His eyes looked tired, but hopeful. "Thank you," he said softly. "We've prayed for someone to finally stop them." "Who's them?" I asked. "Linda's gone. You're safe now." Ray's face darkened. He shook his head. "She wasn't the one running things. She answered to someone else. We all knew it." "Who?" I asked. He didn't speak. Instead, he slipped a folded paper into my hand and walked away. I opened it. Inside was a name: Clyde Mercer. I recognized it immediately. Mercer was a businessman with a shiny public reputation. He donated to charities, sat on school boards, and sat at county events. I'd seen him many times, shaking hands and smiling for photographs. On paper, he was a clean, friendly, wealthy man. But I'd always gotten a strange feeling from him, like his smile didn't reach his eyes. If Mercer was behind this, it meant the HOA operation was bigger than I imagined. I headed to the station, ran a deeper check on him, and found something interesting. He had ties to private security contractors. Not illegal, but unusual. His company had contracts overseas. Training men to act like police wouldn't be hard for someone like him. He also owned several houses in Green Valley bought after families left suddenly. Now it made sense. The HOA wasn't just about controlling neighbors. It was a business. A machine built to take properties and flip them for profit. That night, I drove by Mercer's house. It sat on a hill just outside town, large, guarded by tall hedges and stone walls. Lights glowed from every window. The place looked like a palace. I parked a block away and watched. Expensive cars came and went. Men in dark clothing stood near the entrance, pretending to be I knew the look. They were security, not official, private. As I watched, a black SUV pulled in. The same model the fake officers used. My chest tightened. I needed proof, not just suspicion. I stepped out of my car and walked closer, keeping to shadows. The wind rustled the trees, hiding my steps. The SUV doors opened, and 2 men stepped out, carrying boxers. I moved in slowly and listened. "We'll deal with the neighborhood first," one said. "The chief hasn't left yet. If he stays, we'll handle him," the other answered. They walked inside, leaving the SUV trunk open. I slid closer. Inside were files, addresses, payment records, maps of Green Valley. Perfect evidence. I snapped pictures with my phone. Then I heard footsteps behind me. A flashlight beam cut through the dark. "Who's there?" a voice shouted. I ducked behind a hedge, holding still. The beam swept past, inches from my face. My heart hammered. I waited until the footsteps faded, then slipped back toward my car. As I reached the door, a voice called from the darkness, "Chief Cole." I froze. A tall man stepped into the streetlight sharp suit, calm eyes. Mercer. He smiled like he already owned me. "Busy night?" he asked. I said nothing. He walked closer and leaned in. "You've made things complicated, but you should know. Linda was replaceable." His voice was smooth as ice. "You can still leave," he said. "This place isn't for you." I stared at him. "I'm not going anywhere." His smile faded. "I hope you're ready," he whispered, "because things will get harder." Fast he turned away. Calm, unbothered. I stood there, watching him disappear into the night, knowing one thing for certain: the real war had just begun. After my meeting with Mercer in the shadows, I knew things were going to get worse before they got better. He wasn't afraid of me, and that made him dangerous. Men like him only fear one thing: exposure. If I wanted to stop him, I needed evidence strong enough to burn his entire operation down. The photos I'd taken from his SUV were a start, but I needed more, something that connected him directly to the fake officers, the stolen properties, and the money trail. At sunrise, I headed to the station. My team trusted me, but I didn't tell them everything. I couldn't risk information leaking. Instead, I selected 2 officers I trusted with my life: Reyes and Mitchell. Both had worked undercover. Both were calm, under pressure. I briefed them quietly and showed them the photos. Reyes's jaw tightened as she flipped through them. "So the HOA was just a cover," she said. "Exactly," I replied. "Mercer trains men to pose as officers, scares homeowners, forces them out, then buys their property cheap." Mitchell shook his head. "That's organized theft." "It's more than theft," I said. "It's a network. We planned a warrant for Mercer's estate, but first, we needed a legal trigger. The fake cops we arrested had confessed verbally, but we needed something signed." I headed to the holding cell and found the leader of the 3 sitting alone, staring at the floor. He looked tired, shaky. When I told him I could reduce his sentence if he cooperated, he broke fast. He admitted everything: the training, the payments, the threats, and named Mercer as the mastermind. He signed a written statement. That was enough to move. By mid-afternoon, a judge signed the warrant. We rolled out before sunset, 4 squad cars and an unmarked vehicle. As we approached Mercer's estate, security men stepped forward, trying to look official. They weren't. When they realized we were real law enforcement, their faces changed. Some backed away, others reached for weapons, but my team was ready. Within minutes, they were on the ground, hands cuffed. We entered the house. Inside, it looked like a palace: marble floors, tall ceilings, walls lined with modern art. But wealth doesn't hide crime. In his office, we found what we were looking for: files, signed documents, bank transfers. A digital server hidden behind a false wall contained records of every property taken, every payment collected, and every fake officer trained. Thousands of pages of proof. While officers secured the estate, I walked upstairs. I found Mercer standing in his study, sipping tea like nothing was happening. He didn't even bother to turn around. "You know," he said calmly, "most men would take the warning and leave." "I'm not most men," I answered. He nodded slowly. "That's what Linda said." I stepped closer. "You manipulated this whole neighborhood. You stole homes from people who trusted you." He finally turned to face me. "I gave them opportunities. They just didn't appreciate it. You threatened them. You terrorized them." Mercer smiled. "Fear is the strongest motivator." "Not anymore," I said. I told him he was under arrest. He didn't resist. He placed his wrists forward, almost amused. "You think this ends with me?" he asked. "There are others." "It ends with you here," I said simply. "And for Green Valley, that was enough." We transported him to the station. The press arrived fast. News of a county-wide HOA scam spread everywhere. Neighbors gathered outside, cheering as Mercer was led inside in handcuffs. Some cried, some laughed. For the first time since I moved there, Green Valley felt alive, free. Over the next weeks, victims were reimbursed using the funds we recovered. The HOA was dissolved. The fake officers received prison time. Mercer faced charges that guaranteed he'd never see daylight outside prison walls again. One evening, I sat on my porch, Ray walked over, smiling gently. Feels different now, he said. It is, I replied. The wind blew softly. Kids rode their bikes down the street. Lawns grew without threats. People laughed. It finally felt like a neighborhood, not a trap. I thought I moved here for peace. Maybe I did. But sometimes peace needs a little fight before it settles. Green Valley had its peace now. And so did I. If you enjoyed this story and want more HOA dramas, make sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe to HOA Bright Reality on YouTube. Your support helps us bring more unbelievable real-life stories to life.